Right, evening everybody. It is Friday, 30th of September, and I apologise in advance. I am extremely tired. I've no idea why. It's been a bit of a rough week anyway, but it's got nothing to do with baby turning up, so I'm potentially going to be even more tired in the very near future. But for whatever reason today, I've come home from work and I'm just incredibly sleepy, so I'm hoping to crack through these fairly quickly. 2 Irish tonight. Continuing our run, and the first one is this one, which is Kilbeggan, which was a donation from a guy in America called Pete James, who sent me, I think it was 3 American whiskies and this, of all things. So I've been sitting on this sample since end of May, waiting to get through my run of Irish. So Pete, thanks very much, if you're still watching, obviously. So Kilbeggan, if you watched my feckin' Irish whiskey, where I did a quick overview in terms of all the distilleries in Ireland, the Kilbeggan distillery is here, and it was founded in 1757. It's actually a county called County Westmeath, and it's named after, it's spelt St. Beacon or St. Beacon, so it's B-E-C-A-N, but there's like accents on 3 of the letters, and there's probably a completely different pronunciation of it. But he was one of what are known as the 12 Apostles of Ireland, who set up a monastery quite close to the area in the 6th century. So that's what the area's named after. The distillery was set up in 1757. There was a guy called John Locke that actually took over the distillery in 1843. Now the Kilbeggan distillery has been known as Locke's Distillery, and there is a Locke's whiskey that's available as well, which ties into this distillery. It stayed in his family and was actually passed down to his granddaughters in 1943, but in the 20s and 30s it was really quite struggling through like economic hardships of post-First World War, downturn. Irish whiskey was starting to slide, prohibition, all of this lot, and it was really struggling. And in 1947 it was actually put up for sale, and it kind of goes a bit messy here because it got taken over by a conglomerate who were actually then done for fraud. Some of the conglomerate were involved in a political party that ended up in Ireland, that ended up basically kind of losing an election because of the fraud that came through, and it didn't help the distillery itself. So it closed down in 1954, or production ceased in 1954. The distillery itself closed down completely in 1957. Now, 25 years later, 1982, I think, because as we know, if you've been watching my videos before, my maths is pretty shocking, nearly as bad as my geography. It was actually restored and reopened as a whiskey distilling museum by members of the local community. Now, the Cooley Distillery, which is here, actually bought the license for the Kilbeggan and Locke's brands, so they were releasing Kilbeggan and Locke's whiskey as well, but it was not made at Kilbeggan, it was made at the Cooley Distillery but called Kilbeggan. So it was one of these ones where it's not quite what it says on the label. Now, they ended up taking over ownership of the distillery itself, and in 2007 they actually started production again, and went into full production in 2010. So it is now back as a working distillery. They've got 2 pot stills there, and one of them is actually dates back to the 1800s, and apparently it is the oldest working pot still in the world. In 2011, Beam Suntory took over Cooley and Kilbeggan Distillery, so it is now owned by the sort of behemoth that's Beam Suntory. So although this talks now, they started in 2000, like full production in 2010, so we're looking at like 2013, 2014 when Kilbeggan's own brand came through. I don't know how old this miniature is from Pete. I think it's fairly recent. It's very kind of you to donate this. This is what the bottle looks like now. I think there's a slight change from this one, but I think that's actually relatively recent, and it might tie in with them putting their own stock in it. It's a blended whiskey, so there is malt whiskey in there as well, but I've got a feeling that this is actually Kilbeggan from Cooley rather than the Kilbeggan itself, and it's entirely possible that it kind of started kind of integrating Kilbeggan whiskey into Cooley's because they're owned by the same company. Obviously 2007, when it reopened and started producing again, was the 250th anniversary of the distillery itself. So again, blended Irish whiskey. I can't get the damn thing open. Come on, there we go. You're looking at about 28 quid for this. Master of Malt was selling it. Now, I've been looking at some of the prices of the Irish whiskey, and it seems to have crept up in price since I was selling it. When I was working at the whiskey shop, so we're talking about 10 years ago, so it is 10 years ago, admittedly, we were looking at about 15 to 20 quid for Irish blended whiskies, and now it seems to be 20 to 25. So prices have gone up. I mean, I'm starting to realise I'm sounding quite old by saying, well, it was a lot cheaper in my day, but it seems to have kind of crept up more than I was expecting it to. So 28 quid for this, which for me feels quite steep, but the feckin' Irish whiskey that I had the other night was 26 quid. So maybe that's what we're looking at, is like 25 quid as a standard price for Irish whiskey. So quite a nice glass on the outside, a little bit dirty. Quite a nice, it's light, but it's quite fresh colour. It actually looks quite bright. Whether they've added colouring to it or not, I've absolutely no idea. But it's kind of it's a white winey colour, but it looks a bright colour. It's quite odd, actually. Now, 40%, yes, 40%, but it's a little bit spirity on the nose. There's a bit of a bite to it. It kind of gets the back of your nose. It's kind of slightly burning your nose hairs. It's a little bit spirity. Now, there's a bit of grassiness to it as well. There's a little bit of kind of fresh cut grass and hay, a slight bit of citrus, but not too much. More lime than lemon, to be perfectly honest. But it's got a spirity edge to it as well, and almost a dry white wine character to it as well. It's not a bad nose. It would be really nice if it was just ever so slightly softer and just let that grass and citrus kick through. Actually, it feels like it's going to become spirity. It sort of tingles on your tongue and it feels like it's going to bite, and it doesn't really. It's quite sherbety. It's very much like lemon sherbet. Sherbet dib dabs, but without the licorice stick that you would dab into your dib. But it's got a nice little sort of sparkling tingle to it, which is quite sherbety. The grassiness and the lime, lime definitely is there. Almost lime zest. It's not sharp. It's not a sharp sour lime. It's almost like kind of lime flavouring has been added to it, but it's very pleasant. It feels like it's going to go spirity, but it doesn't. It's almost like it fizzes up, and you're kind of like waiting to go, oh, it's a bit sharp, and it doesn't. It's a really good balance. It's actually very pleasant. I like this. There's a nice underlying softness. There's almost a bit of honey to it. And it's not honey and lemon, it's honey and lime, which sounds like an odd combination, but it does actually work really well. It's slightly tingly, it's fresh. I'm liking this. I am liking this quite a lot. And it's a fresh, almost summery whiskey, actually, to be perfectly honest. This would be nice lightly chilled, I think, as well, to be honest. If you put this in the fridge and you poured this from the fridge, maybe not the freezer, would probably knock it out a little bit. But if you put the bottle in the fridge, because I don't like putting ice in it, because ice melts, it waters it down too much. I'd rather pour the bottle itself from the fridge or the freezer. But if you put a bottle of Kilbeggan in the fridge and you poured it into maybe even a chilled glass on a summer's day, that would actually work really, really well. It's light, it's fresh, it's delicate, it's got a nice little zing to it. It's really good, actually. Really nice. Some people might find it slightly too sharp, but for me, it's just about right. If it was any sharper, it would be too much. It really comes close to the edge where it comes so close to the edge where any further it would be a little bit too sour and a little bit too much for the bite, but it doesn't quite go that far. And because it's got that background honey as well, it just reins it in a little bit. I really like that. I really like that a lot. There's a really distinct limey citrus flavour which just lifts it and gives it character. And yeah, as a summer whiskey, I think that's really, really nice. That surprised me. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting a lot out of it, but that is, yeah, I'm impressed with that. And 28 quid, I think if you can find that for 25 quid, do you know what? That's actually a pretty good price, to be perfectly honest. I'm impressed, very impressed with that. I like that a lot. Right, quick rinse out and then we'll crack on with another one. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.